time. All right, so I'm going to start off first looking at our projected elementary growth in 2024 and in 2029. So what you have in front of you on your left-hand side, these are the fall projections for 5 years from now in 2024. And just very briefly, the colors on the map will tell you a lot. Anything that's in light green or dark green tells us that there are more seats available than students, so there's a surplus of seats. Conversely, if you see yellow, if you see orange or red, that tells us there's a deficit. And if you see sort of bright yellow, it's sort of a warning. We're not quite, we have some seats available, but it's not a lot. So looking at this map, you can see very clearly that our crowding is not evenly distributed across the county. So the numbers that you see under those school titles literally tell you the number of projected seats available at each school. So for example, we see that Ferry Farm Elementary in the south has 132 seats open in 2024. That's the projection. Also, we see that Grafton Village has 70 plus seats available. Conversely, right next door, north, Stafford Elementary has a deficit of seats. So this sort of gives you a better idea of what crowding looks like, and from a planning perspective, we like to look at the data this way to figure out, well, what are some ways that we can accommodate enrollment and be able to accommodate our students, and at the same time figure out what's the best approach to add seats. So that's sort of the benefit of the map. Sort of looking at the 2024 map and then looking across at the 2029 map, when you see a shift in color, like you can see that towards the north of the map, it's shifting from a green-orange look to more of a red look. So that's telling us we're seeing growth because the seat counts are going from seats available to no seats available. So wanted to again provide you with that visual information so you can see what sort of growth looks like according to our projections. And I'll give you a minute to digest that, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Have we looked at taking the CIP and kind of superimposing what we want to do with the CIP onto here and then coming up with the 2029 numbers? Mm-hmm. or years after that? Meaning, mm-hmm. Are we taking into consideration what these pictures will look like after we do elementary school number 18, mm-hmm. maybe a redistricting, maybe high school number 6? Are we including that in these pictures?
So right now, the answer is no. However, I did at the bottom of the slide provide a footnote, and it says for elementary school 18, when that comes online in August, we're asking that it come online in August 2026.
Right.
If that were to happen, it would take the elementary capacity utilization from 100.3% down to 93.7%. So essentially what we're saying is, even if we add those seats, we're still above the 90% threshold, and we need to start planning for more elementary seats. So I've sort of tried to sum that up really quickly. Also, you know, looking at the map where we have schools that are adjacent to each other, and one school is crowded and the other school has seats available, we look at that, and that might be prime for a boundary change. So right now, and you know, obviously that has to be something that's discussed with the superintendent to get his feedback on, and ultimately if he wants to take a recommendation to the board about something like that. But this is the type of information we use to have that decision-making process to get it kicked off. So hopefully by you having this information at your disposal, you can sort of see what staff may be leaning towards and thinking.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really important question because as we're looking for the land for the sixth high school, there has been discussion, is the land going to be able to also host a elementary school?
Yeah, that was going to be my question. It looks like in Margaret Brent's district, is that not about the area where we're looking to put the high school? So I'm wondering if we have a lot big enough for the high school 6
Mhm.
and an elementary school, where would it fall on that map?
Mhm. So that'll be a decision that we get
Because
to.
you've looked at 4 plots, so you
Mhm.
sort of have an idea of where they are, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, the general area approved by the boards to look at is that southwest corridor. So if you really think it's more of, actually right where it says Hartwood, is kind of that general area near 17, that southwest portion that we're looking at.
So it's quite a ways out, I guess. What I'm asking is it's more out here on 17
Correct.
and not like in there.
Yes, ma'am.
So it looks to me like the southwest area has an issue with the high school and the elementary school areas.
Right.
So I'm going to go back now before I came on the FAB again,
Okay.
when I was actually on the CIP advisory committee before I came on this board.
Oh, okay.
We talked a lot about this because we anticipated all this was coming,
Mhm.
right? All of this growth was going to happen. And the fact that, and we've talked to the supervisors about this a million times, if not more,
Okay.
about making sure that we're doing things strategically.
Mhm.
And a renovation of Hartwood is never going to fly
Mhm.
with those folks across the street. So I don't understand why it's in this CIP as a renovation versus a rebuild. And just hear me out. We're not getting any seats by doing a renovation on a building that has no public water. And almost the same thing with Drew. I mean, Trish brought it up at the last FAP meeting. If we're only doing 63 seats, we're not gaining anything. So why are we not kind of looking at repurposing Drew Middle School and putting a new middle school, the new Drew, in that can hold 1,200 students versus whatever it is, the 675 now? That would add seats, it would repurpose the building, and that's why I asked that question about how many students are in the day school at Stafford High School, because we can take them and repurpose this Drew as a full day school and expand the program. So I'm just wondering why we weren't having those types of conversations.
Well, the question I have though is, here's a 70-year-old school.
Right.
The cost of renovation versus the cost of new construction. So I agree with you, repurposing it might be a more viable solution than renovating.
Right.
Because the ticket, I mean, what would a new middle school cost?
Up to 77,528,000, according to this chart in
Oh,
2029.
I mean, I know you haven't been here very long,
But
but,
what we did was, last year, the school board adopted a CIP plan. And the only thing that has been changed, if I'm wrong, but you say it,
Okay.
was flipping the special ed and Hartwood.
Drew, we moved
Mhm.
Hartwood down
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it just doesn't
So
seem
we
like
are
viable.
just following what the board, what was that, June of last year, September?
September last year.
Yeah, so that just answers why do we have this on the list like we have it, is because that's the action which the board took. Now, of course, you could change it, but that's just to help understand why
Well-
you're seeing it like this.
right.
What I'm wondering is if for the purposes of, because this data we need to get it to the board of supervisors.
Right.
We need to have a decision now about whether we need middle school seats, because it looks like the projected growth of middle school has even been higher than, every year it's been higher for the last 4 years than you anticipated. So the possibility that we're gonna run out of middle school seats is pretty high.
Right, and I'm going to get to that middle school slide next. We're still on elementary, so. Mhm.
But my point is,
Mhm.
elementary school 18 and high school number 6 are pretty definitive. We definitely need those because we're running into a problem there. But can we do if we put elementary school 6 on the same site that we're doing 18 on the
Mhm.
same site we're doing high school number 6,
Mhm.
is that gonna alleviate, because it looks like that Hartwood district is one of the areas where we have higher than average growth.
Right, it is. And also looking at the map, if you'll notice in the northeast section of the county, we have areas going from green into red. So we're seeing,
Oh, Aquaya's hosed.
Yeah.
I saw what they're doing with the Stafford,
Mhm.
downtown Stafford.
Mhm.
This place is going to be hosed. I mean, it's going to be impossible to get in and out of here anyway, but it just, we're in a pickle.
yeah.
Well,
We're
we're
in a
already
pickle.
behind is the problem.
Well, we're not gonna solve any of that
Right.
now.
Right.
But I mean, I think they're really good points, and I agree 100%. And the issue that you raised about the middle school, I think if we do leave the Drew renovation here, we should somehow footnote it and say that we will be considering adding a new middle school and repurposing Drew for, other uses.
Well, expanding, isn't
Well,
that what they want
possibly,
us to do?
probably
Expand
the
day school program?
ECSE could possibly go in there as well.
Right,
Because
it's right
those
on line.
classrooms, if we're going to basically, take all the walls down, or,
Right.
we can build what we need. But if we leave the Drew renovation in, which I don't think we're going to have a lot of choice right now, because we
Right.
haven't had that much discussion, and this has to go out.
Sure.
But I do like your idea of is saying, hey, let's look at, instead of spending 26 million, let's consider building a new middle school, which will give us up to the 1,100 capacity. So we could footnote that, and since this is a living document, and since it's not going to be for years anyway,
Yeah.
we can move on with that.
Yeah.
Right,
I
and
can
to back
swallow
on
that.
Ms. Healy's point, I think that we need to make a decision about what the CIP looks like, and I think we're best to take those 4 projects and say, these 4 are key, they're important, but we realize that we're going to need more middle school seats, and we realize that, we may need elementary school 19 before we anticipate it too. So we need to get something over there, and I think that keeping the top 4 priorities and adding things like the 3 hours and footnoting it, that we have more growth than where we're able to deal with, because we're already behind the curve.
I mean,
Yeah, can we make sure that we get a footnote in there for,
And I like having the maps up there, because then it's, I think especially, it shows it. It's like, this is what we're dealing with.
I do say 2 things, please. One, when you see the middle school map, there may be an alternative to what we're discussing. So, he's gonna walk along, we're gonna walk you through the alternative possibly to another middle school. But the other thing I would just maybe offer, look how expensive and look how limited we are at Ferry Farm. So 26 million is a lot of money, I'm not suggesting it's not, but that's the oldest building, it's a tired building. So 26 million to
Yeah.
do that building.
to do Drew?
To do Drew, plus the
So,
lot's small, there's not adequate parking.
It's not an overwhelming number when you think comparison to what other projects are. But when Lionel goes over the middle school model, you might begin to see another option available to you that does not include another middle school.
Can we have these maps on a single page? Because even with this, I have a hard time reading those numbers.
They're a little teeny
I mean,
tiny.
if I hold it really far out, I can sort of read it. But, I mean, just like, say, one map on one page, so I can look at the school and see, yeah, I'll get one of those.
It has a light.
Not a problem.
Oh, that's fantastic.
we can do
All right,
that.
just hand these out to everybody, and we can whack.
It's a
on it.
for accommodation.
Yes.
It's fine.
I think that would really help
Okay.
make your story. I mean, leave it like this for the comparison purposes, but just to have a
We're
single,
gonna give you a book
single
with
page.
the maps are in it, okay?
Okay.
I mean, I'm saying one on a page
Yeah, they are.
where you can read it.
We'll give,
Oh,
This is that
great.
enrollment accommodation
Oh.
plan.
Ooh,
Ask and you shall receive.
yeah, thank you.
yes. And if you need it bigger, we can make it larger.
Yeah, I can feel
That
it.
Page 32.
toasty, yeah.
So, starts on page 30 with the
Yep.
maps.
Oh, yeah, they're
Yes.
great. I can read them.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, so,
that's good.
Okay, so,
Okay, so much
let's,
for
so
our
we're good with the
purview.
the elementary school. Let's move on to the middle school.
okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Yeah, this one will be interesting, you're all interested.
Okay, so here's our projected middle school growth, and this is, again, for 2024 and 2029. In 2024, we see we're in reasonable shape. I mean, there clearly is, again, kids aren't where we actually want them to be all the time. So we have seats available, but it's not evenly distributed. You can clearly see Dixon Smith has a surplus of 333 seats projected in 2024. Gale has projected surplus of 121 seats. Conversely, Drew, Stafford, and Heim, they are showing seat shortages. Again, normally when we have this sort of issue, a school without seats next to a school with seats, that's typically primed for a boundary adjustment as a short-term solution. And then, of course, in the longer term, we always look to add more seats, because if you look out to 2029 now, we're starting to see things starting to turn red. And that means we're getting a bigger issue as well. Per county policy, once we're at 90%, we need to start planning for a new school or planning for more seats. In looking at the maps here, one could suggest, one option would be potentially additions to middle schools, possibly in the north at Poole, Heim, and/or Stafford.
I'm not sure putting more than 1,100 students in a
Right.
middle school is a good choice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not happy.
I just think
I-
that
I was-
becomes logistically hard on our principals, our
Mhm.
teachers. I mean, I know even at Heim now,
Mhm.
their ESL classes are overcrowded. They have students standing in the back of the classroom, they don't even have desks. So
Yeah.
we already have crowding issues at some of our
And
schools.
the reason we built Heim to begin with was because Stafford Middle School was shoulder-to-shoulder kids, and it was just, you just couldn't, we couldn't deal with that. So we ended up having to build Heim
Mhm.
to relieve some of that those extra kids that were coming.
I see.
Any more than 1,100 middle schoolers,
Mhm.
I could possibly see it on a high school level going a little bit higher than
Mhm.
normal,
Mhm.
but on the middle school level,
Mhm.
that's really challenging for principals, like she said, anyhow. It's the age, it's the mentality, it's the
They're just
maturity
a
level of these
difficult
kids.
age to work with.
Okay.
They're challenging. They have unique challenges.
Right.
The cafeteria.
Right,
Mhm.
services.
Right.
We are
It
not-
just doesn't work.
We would not disagree with you that smaller would be better. We're just suggesting with all the new schools that we're going to have on the capital improvement plan,
Right,
this scenario is still going to happen. And if there's not a commitment for the sixth, I mean, there is a commitment, I think, for the sixth high school, the 18th elementary school, and all the other things. Now we're adding a new middle school. We just have to, just be honest that would we get this before 2029? So it may not be an either or, it may be an and. We need a new middle school and do something else. Because some of these schools are going to be pretty above their capacity by 2029.
Well, we could look at some modules, because we have them at Wright, and I think they're working really well. They
Mhm.
put, some of the chorus out in, modular trail or whatever you want to call it, but, it's working. So if we need something for a temporary fix, that's something we
Yeah.
can consider.
Right, and we would definitely do that. Looking at the map in 2024 is suggesting we would either use modular relocatable classrooms or do boundary changes to alleviate crowding at Heim, Stafford, and Drew. We need to do something. And clearly Drew, right next door to Dixon Smith, which has 300 seats available, is sort of maybe.
so you're new, so I'm going to share our
Okay.
PC terms with you in
Okay.
case no one else has.
Oh, okay.
They're learning cottages.
Okay.
Oh,
got
And,
it.
trailers.
and their boundary realignments,
Boundary realignments, and I got it, and
I didn't
learning
talk about
cottages.
those.
Okay,
or the R word.
the R word, gotcha.
This is interesting, though, these projections. You're projecting 92 seats at Wright, because right now, aren't they just about at capacity?
Let me look.
I haven't
really
looked
quick.
at this year's, but in the past, they've been pretty much,
Yeah, and so.
up there. So that's like 10% reduction.
Let's see here. So on page 23 of the report, we can look at last year's enrollment, 2019. So Wright, it was under capacity. There were 22 seats available.
22, that's,
So it's
De
not
minimis.
overutilized, at least it wasn't last year. And so what these projections are saying is it pretty much stays.
I mean, you've got 98% capacity, 97.6, that's pretty darn high.
Right. So it's high, correct. And
That's the highest of all the middle schools.
correct, but also
last
we
year.
we have Pool at 80%, that's getting on the lower end. So, in a perfect world, schools would operate around 90 to 95% and never go higher than 95%.
But all I'm saying is, if this is at almost 98
Mhm.
last year, and if they're going to have 92
It's saying it's
empty
flat.
seats.
The projections are suggesting sort of flat enrollment, not necessarily going up. The same thing
Oh,
if you
that
look at.
90, is that 92 a percentage or seats?
No, that's seat counts, so.
Isn't that 10% of the seats?
Yeah, so the
That's going
numbers.
down- That's going down almost 8%.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
Again, it's a projection, and it's saying it's relatively flat. It's not suggesting
Not
that there's a
flat if
lot
it's
of
going
growth.
down 8%. I mean,
Okay.
maybe that's just me, but that's a big number to me.
Yeah.
Go down from 22 seats to 92, that's
Yeah, about 70 seats, yeah.
70 seats in a few years.
Yeah, well, and again, yes, that's the projection.
Hmm,
And
interesting.
so looking at Dixon Smith, according to our projections, it's relatively flat in 2024, 333 seats available. Going out 10 years, 322 seats available.
There's really not a whole lot of development going on around down there to speak
Yeah.
of. I mean,
Right.
that was the problem with justifying rebuilding Ferry Farm.
Mhm.
We knew this growth was coming, and we desperately needed seats,
Mhm.
which was the problem.
Mhm.
The county has known, this is the county, their strategic plan has all the growth in all these areas where there's public water.
Mhm.
So this isn't going to be a surprise to anybody
Right.
that now we have to put schools in the areas where they designated all the development should be, right?
Right.
So-
It shouldn't be a surprise.
Are the two fastest growing areas
Yeah.
in Stafford.
Where-
Hartwood and
Hartwood,
Aquia?
Aquia, Yeah.
And the Weldon Cooper is verifying it. I mean, that's where the housing market is hot.
But look at Haim. Haim is going
Yeah, I was
from
going to say that.
36 seats
And Widewater is going to
Deficit.
be
Today to
in
150.
2029.
156.
I
That's,
think they're anticipating some development going on in
where?
in the peninsula, where, what's his name owns all that land.
Yeah, there's, I think, a couple areas where they're looking at it. And if you
Wow.
look
I
at the
mean,
map
that's-
in 2029, Heim and
that's
Widewater are
huge.
both,
That, I mean, Haim looks like it's the biggest. I mean, Stafford's pretty big too. It's almost 50 seats, but that's 120 more seats
yeah.
filled.
Yeah, so
Well,
Haim
the
is
other thing
showing
is,
a-
with, if we're building high schools and we're building elementary schools, I mean, it makes sense that at some point you're going to have students that go in the middle school.
Yes.
What is Home showing?
Well, Haim is showing a deficit of 156 seats.
Oh, it's a minus. Oh,
That's a
I thought it
minus,
was
so
a
we're
plus.
short.
No,
We
no,
don't
no,
have
it's
seats
red.
available.
It's
So
minus.
red is,
Red is bad.
That is bad.
well, that's what I'm saying. Right now,
Uh-huh.
they're minus 36.
6 in 2024, that's the
Oh,
projection.
24. Well, what about today? What are they?
Today-
It's minus
In
36.
10
Oh,
years, they're going to turn around by 200 kids
So Haim.
no, it's 5 years,
That's
24 to
huge.
29.
to the upside.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, it's up in that corridor.
Yeah,
So Haim, last year,
Stafford Hill.
yeah.
Stafford Hill.
Yeah, I mean, well, this whole area is being developed as this downtown Stafford. They're talking about 300, just here at this corner here, 300 single-family townhomes and
Yeah.
and apartment. I mean, that's a lot of,
Heim is
A
at
lot of
90% right now.
Wow.
yeah.
All right, well, let's
So, but.
we're going to have
But I
to get
think,
into this at some
right.
point, but right
But I
now.
think that if we set the priorities, the things that we know we
Right.
need to do, and say, we're going to have to, we're going to need high school 6, we're going to need elementary school 18, and we're probably going to need middle school 9.
yes.
Well, that,
And I
yeah,
think-
that's where we set the bar that, if we're gonna put Drew out, we're looking at renovating Drew, but we're also looking at, nixing that and building a new school. But if we build a new one, then we gotta take the 800, or however many kids from Drew, put them in the new school, and that's gonna reduce your additional seats to 300.
What's the capacity now at Drew for general ed?
Drew, the program capacity, Drew's capacity is 650 seats. It's our smallest middle school.
Yeah.
Most of our other middle schools are at
So
1,100.
450 we gain.
But we can't really expand Drew, it's only on 15 acres, it already doesn't have enough parking.
Right.
doesn't have enough field space, cafeteria.
There's
gym.
nowhere to go.
There's nowhere
There's,
to
you
go.
can't, we
No,
can't,
but
it can't
if we
build
built
out.
a new one instead, the issue is whether we would continue to use Drew or whether we just build a new one and say it's a plus of 450 seats, build it somewhere in the vicinity, and then take the 650 and then add 450 to it for new seats. I don't know.
Is
But
Stafford?
I think that's a discussion we have to have before next year's CIP.
Yes,
Right.
not now. But
This-
somehow we have to put a note in, if we send this over with Drew with the renovation.
Yeah, so it's not a surprise to them
that-
when we change it
that
next year.
we are, we are looking into whether we need a full
Yeah.
new school with a capacity of 1,100, which may or may not take the place of the renovation.
Right.
Right.
Is Stafford High School the only other school that we have that we are conducting this public day school?
That's for the high school level.
What about middle school or,
Well, a similar thing would be, of course, at Drew Middle School.
right, I understand. Are we doing anything on the elementary level?
I don't think so.
Some at Drew.
Oh, what's that?
There's at least one classroom at Drew that are younger kids.
Oh, yeah, at Drew Middle School, we have a younger.
Oh, okay,
Part of that-
okay.
It's part of the day school.
Right.
In the classroom over the back right
I-
side.
And I do think we're going to have to relocate that at some point. If we don't, we're not going to get a new middle school in enough time to deal with some of this growth
Right,
that's
right.
coming. So
And what,
it's there.
what kind of got me thinking about this is for years now, they've been wanting to expand the public day school. It saves us money from outsourcing and all this other stuff. So that was kind of the impetus behind, well, maybe we can turn Drew into make the whole building the, Heather Emfel day school building. So we'll see.
Or we could even add some of the early childhood education special out there too.
We did get you the numbers, is it on here, of
So,
the renovation we did?
Let's let
Bring
Lionel
it-
continue.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, this is one of the handouts that you should have gotten. It's just a
Okay.
quick
Oh,
summary.
yes.
Mr. Holler back had asked for just the cost of converting that space at Drew Middle School. And this was over 10 years ago.
Okay,
And some of those are operating costs, you can tell, so some of that technically could be relocated.
sure.
But some of it are very fixed, parking and room adjustments.
Right.
We've gotten our money's worth out of that.
Yeah, I would say so. Yep. It's not as, I thought it was significantly more than what's here. So thank you for putting that together.
Okay, so now I'll move on to high school projections. And I am going to, so what we have here now is the growth projected for 2024. And we can see that at the high school level, at 5, right now, we have North Stafford, Colonial Forge, and Stafford High School, as well as Brook Point. They're projected to be overcrowded. Obviously, Brook Point is most overcrowded,
Oh, my God.
and we're going to have.
Does that
a-
say 306?
306.
Yes, that's the
Get out your
projection.
little thingy.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
I don't have a map here for 2029. However, if you want to look to see, well, what's the impact in 2029? If we didn't build a new school, what would it look like?
Oh, God.
Let's turn to
Well,
page.
you know what, the supervisors have already indicated their support for the high school number 6, so I don't think we really even
Yeah.
need to have a whole lot of that. They
Okay.
know, we need that, we need it now.
Yep, so we need it now, and so I didn't put a map together for 2029 because I don't know with the R word, where the students are going to be located. So,
Boundary realignment.
It's
right,
cute.
boundary alignment. So,
I won't be here.
I didn't want to confuse anything, so that's why that's not there.
Now,
I don't know that by sports realignment, is
But I think that we're pretty clear, high school 6, elementary school 18. We drew, but we're gonna need additional middle school seats and the early childhood education, and we need to consider, as a board, reusing maybe Drew as the day school and maybe for some of those early childhood education special ed seats. Because its location on one is not bad anyway.
Right, right.
So, but it's just that that renovation is not gonna come cheap, because a renovation is usually more expensive
Mhm.
than a new build, because you have unknown unknowns. I just speak from experience.
Like asbestos removal?
Or worse.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to, what are we going to send over, or send to the board?
Okay, so I'll move on past high school. So here's our recommended large capital projects list.
Okay.
And of course, would love to get your input on the priority here. So right now, we have high school 6 as the top rank, followed by elementary school 18, number 2, followed by Drew renovation, number 3, the additional ECSE capacity at number 4, Hartwood renovation at 5, the additional school seats at 6, and North Stafford High School renovation at 7.
So these dates are correct. So we're looking for these additional 2025, 2026.
Yes.
The middle school seats 2029, which moves Hartwood up 2028. But the question is, I again, come back to, is investing in Hartwood, because all we're getting is storage, is it really a viable?
Even Holly
Is it really
said,
a project that needs to be out of middle
right,
school?
Holly said it's never going to get through.
It won't.
So,
So let's move the middle school up,
yeah.
move the middle school up.
So we want to move the middle school to which
They're Hartwood.
rank?
Just switch them.
Switch them? Okay,
Keep Hartwood and North Stafford at the bottom.
got it.
Well, what about this E ECSE? Where's that high school, the elementary school? We still have room at Garrisonville?
Yes.
And we talked about this during the last process. There is room at Garrisonville. They have had a significant, ECSE, presence in the past. They've got a nice little courtyard that the classrooms open out to, that were there. So we may even want to look at the middle school ahead of that. But then we get back to your thoughts, Irene, about rather than do the renovation at Drew for the middle school, do we just build a whole new middle school?
Right.
But if we include the Drew kids in there, that would give us 450, so we'd have to look at the numbers and see if we added 450 seats to our middle schools, where would that put us in
Right.
terms of being able to accommodate? But I don't think it's something.
Given the other open seats in some of the other areas
Right.
that we could fix with the redistricting.
Right, yeah, I don't think we're not gonna solve it now, but I think we can address it by saying, when we list Drew, we can say we're considering repurposing Drew for day schools, and maybe even some ECSE, who knows?
Right.
Depending on what's going on, but I think the middle school extra seats may be more of a need. If we can use the Garrisonville seats for some of the ECSE in the north.
Right.
But I think it's next year's CIP. I think we really
Yeah.
have to evaluate
But,
this for next
but do we want to leave the,
Focus on-
do we want to leave the ECSE above the middle school,
We
adding
might
the
as
middle school?
well, because then we can look at Garrisonville, because we'd have the funds to do that.
And I tell you, we're not going to get all 3 of those projects approved in 1 year
No.
No.
for funding. That's just not going to happen.
That was my point on the middle school one. The other
Yeah.
thing that I don't know the answer, maybe Lyle does, I know from previous experience, if you think of the ESCE not as a separate project, but blended into another project, once you start having the contractors and everybody there, that cost may go significantly lower. So like elementary 18, if as you're designing it, you're thinking about
Right.
early childhood, and you put a wing there, that's just something to think about in the
Absolutely.
planning.
But I think.
Well, if we did that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But no, I just think that if we leave these things the way they are, because the elementary school's already there, we can add the footnotes for the middle school and for the ECSEs that maybe we could incorporate those into the elementary school project. And then if we choose to, we can still look at Garrisonville, we can still look at Drew renovations for next year.
We took half of the ECSE capacity that we need to add half of it in the south with the elementary school 18, and then accommodate the other half in one of the schools in the north.
Right.
That we, because we know we're going to have some space.
Right.
Then we may be able to, do that, and as Dr. Kisner says, the additional cost to elementary school 18 is most likely not going to equal half of the cost of the the 10 classrooms to add 5, if they're already doing it.
Right.
Right, I agree.
So,
Works for me.
Sounds good. Okay.
so where are we're going to have high school 6, elementary school 18. Then what's going to be next?
The Drew
To Drew?
renovation,
And what footnote do you want to add to that?
that we need more capacity for middle school, so that we are considering middle school 9. And then for the ECSE, that we're considering adding seats to elementary school 18 and using one of the other elementary schools. for the
Using
other
available
seats.
space in the north.
Available space in another elementary school.
In the north.
So that those projects stay relatively stable, and then we move the middle school 9 up, just so that they know, and Hartwood and North Stafford are the bottom.
Well, are we going to put Hartwood on there?
We can leave it on there for now, but maybe next year we'll have to really consider whether we're taking it off. I think it's
I'm-
hard to make that decision, because really all we're getting is storage space, right?
We're-
As far as capacity is
As far as,
concerned.
Yeah.
there's no capacity,
There's no
because we
capacity.
can't add capacity.
And,
That's
and
right.
I'll never vote for it.
Right, so.
If
Well, I wonder if we should just take it off for now. I mean, from
I'm
a
fine with
practical,
taking it off
from
for
a,
now.
from a
It's just the
practical
question is
standpoint,
is the
I
rest of the board-
thought Holly asked to have it removed.
I thought she said to
Let's-
take it
let's
off.
take-
I thought
let's
she
take
did.
Hartwood
Let's
off
take
for now.
Hartwood off.
Okay, are we going to
Well,
replace
see,
that
North
with another
Stafford
project?
is going to be
I don't,
no added seats either with
Well,
North
we've
Stafford.
already added another project, because we added middle school 9.
Got it. Okay,
I mean, technically,
okay. Got it. So Hartwood will come off the list,
yeah.
and we'll,
yeah, that.
Have that in
I
our-
To
think
be a
that makes more
rebuild.
sense. I think it's a more effective use of funds, especially since, they're looking at growth. I mean, they're seeing growth. We're gonna have to figure out a way to
We need
work with these
seats.
kids. We can see it.
We need seats. Yep.
Okay.
Just
So we're
to-
good.
I just want to clarify, and we probably need to recap that before we move on, so to make sure Lionel and I understand everything that was just discussed. But you're looking at elementary school 18 as a separate project than the Hartwood Elementary School renovation. So at one time, and this is what the Board of Supervisors had discussed, was if we're adding elementary school 18, that becomes the new Hartwood. So it's not really elementary
No,
school
it's-
18, it's just rebuilding Hartwood and gaining the capacity. But what I hear y'all saying is we're still leaving elementary school 18 on there and just taking off Hartwood.
Right.
But Hartwood's still gonna be a school.
But
Correct.
Hartford, yes.
All right,
But we can do a realignment to alleviate any overcrowding at Hartwood that may give them the storage space that they need. We may be able to accommodate that with elementary school 18 without doing a major renovation there.
Right. And we do want to note with the ECSE that we will be looking into whether we can add some of that capacity with elementary school 18, and then moving say, half of it, or a portion of it, and accommodating the other portion with one of the elementary schools in the north that may have, available capacity. So that, that 8 million would be kind of
Right.
floating.
Right, so keep high school 6, keep elementary school 18, add ECSC to part of elementary school 18 project, keep Drew renovation, say that we're focused on additional seats, keep the ECSC space there, because we may then, but we're going to try to accommodate it in the new elementary school and in a northern and one of the other elementary schools that are existing that have a lower capacity. Remove the Hartwood renovation and add middle school seats as middle school 9. Is that correct?
Hmm?
And then leave North Stafford on there.
all right, so I've got all that. I just want to clarify that, so we're leaving additional E ECSE capacity, 10 classrooms, but we're also footnoting elementary school 18.
We're footnoting it, that we're gonna try to add it to the elementary school, and
Uh-huh.
we're gonna try to put it in an existing elementary school space.
Okay,
So that number might change, we may not need 8 million, we could maybe do that for a lower
But
number.
the date will remain the same.
But the date
Right.
will remain the same.
gotcha. All right,
It's
so,
a placeholder for those seats.
and that's perfect, because now we don't have to adjust our elementary school 18 number to try to include the additional capacity.
Oh, no, well, technically, it's really not elementary school capacity. It would
Correct,
be
right.
Total, little
Yep.
subcategory.
Thank you.
Right. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So that's what we're gonna recommend to the regular board. Do I have a motion?
We just want to also make sure you're aware that we took out high school 7. We don't know how it really got up there. We took it off.
Yeah.
Well, the
I just think-
supervisors put it
yeah,
up
I
there.
think
Yeah.
right now, I think we're asking for a lot, so.
Not in the next 10 years.
Yeah,
We get 6, we'll be doing well.
yeah, yeah.
We've been
As you
asking for
saw
that for 10 years.
Yes.
from the maps and the projections, after that 10 years, we're still looking at additional seats, even with adding high school 6 and elementary school 18. But it's outside of that 10-year window, so just to not clutter up
Well, I
this
think that.
and drive the conversation.
The CIP and the CIP advisory committee need to work on really looking at where we need these seats and what we need. So that we have so next year when we do this, we are behind the schedule.
Well, we've also
That's
talked, periodically about having a CTE center.
Yep.
That might be another issue for discussion. You have a school for CTE that students from all the high schools would go to, for a certain number of days of the week, and that would free up spots in the high schools.
Right, that would-
So it's something that,
I think that would be an
we've had a
excellent-
lot of talk about that, but that's been going on for the whole 20 years I've
And
been here.
that
That's-
means that high school 7 is kind of an amorphous thing, because there's a lot of different things that we could do that.
That's why we own that useless land over there off of Eskimo Hill Road, because there was this grandiose idea that we were gonna build a CTE center and all that other stuff.
No, that's not why we own that land. We'll have that
So anyway,
discussion later.
Are we all in agreement on the CIP for
Yes.
Rockbridge? Okay.
Yes.
So do we have a motion to recommend to?
Yes, motion to approve.
And I second. Well,
Recommend.
as
to-
amended.
As amended.
As
Yes.
amended.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
And this is amazing, these materials. They're really good.
Okay, on to the next item. If I can find my agenda. Okay, we've got the employee health insurance premium holiday. It was something that Ms. Hollerbeck had recommended. And I think you gave us some information
F and G,
on that. So, Mr. Bowman.
oh, here we go.
That's this one, right?
Is it?
Yes. And there's also, I didn't give you a handout, but also attached to the agenda are just what the rates are for the employees. So it's nothing new. We adopted it as part of the budget process, and you would have seen it attached to board packets when we discussed some of the other items. Real quick, the top half of this actually just shows a quick unaudited recap of our FY20 Health Benefits Fund. Long story short is overall, our expenditures exceeded our revenues by $870,000 just in our health benefits fund. So if you recall, we transfer money into our health benefits fund, either from each of our funds, primarily our operating fund, based on the employees that are participating in our health insurance, but also employees pay premiums into our health insurance fund. So that shortfall of 870 was actually planned. When we budgeted, we knew that we had a big surplus in our health benefits fund of cash. So when I budgeted a health benefits fund, we budgeted very aggressively and actually planned to use some fund balance, actually up to 1.2 million, so it actually came in slightly under even the deficit that we were budgeting. But even after that deficit, we're still left with $29.1 million in cash in the health benefits fund. We want to keep a reserve in that fund close to about $9 million. That recommended reserve needs to be updated for the end of this year. That number is actually based on the prior year's number, so we're actually in the process right now with Anthem of recalculating that, finalizing our financials, but I don't expect a huge swing there. So it leaves an adjusted available cash balance of 20.2. If we went back to the original OPEB recommended transfer that was approved back in the late winter, early spring timeframe, that was 14.7. That was approved by both boards. And then I told you guys, gals, this a few months ago, that as we got into COVID, staff were like, hey, let's hold off on making this $14 million transfer to see how everything goes, not knowing how poor the financial situation was going to become. So we held off on that. But even if we had made that transfer, or if we still decide to make that transfer, we would still have $5.6 million. And so the bottom box there is just showing that if we did for the remainder of this fiscal year. So starting November 1st, it's too late to go October 1st for a health insurance employee holiday. If we did a 100% premium reduction, it would cost about $3 million to the health benefits fund. 75% reduction would be a $2.3 million, and a 50% reduction would cost about $1.5 million. I just wanted to give you a few options there. The reason, in the past, when we did this a few years ago, we did 100% for 6 months. It does open you up for some adverse selection. So as we get new employees, there's nothing preventing that employee from taking the best plan and bringing all of their family onto that plan. Even if they're covered by, their spouse could have coverage at another employer. So it gives the employee just a little bit of skin in the game as we get new employees, or if we have life changes. I'm just throwing that out there. We can still go to the full 100%, or we can look at the reduced percentage.
I personally like people to have a little skin in the game, so I'd be more comfortable with the 75% than the 100%. I don't know what your opinions are, Ms. Hollerback, Ms. Healy?
Yeah,
I have a question.
So ultimately, they would still
Chris.
pay 25% of what they pay right now.
This money in the fund, this is money that we as the employer put in, right? It's not any of the employees' premiums. Is that correct, or?
So,
That was my understanding from the past, so just.
yes, so,
That's important to me, and I'll explain why
um,
we get this answer.
so it's employee premiums and employer premiums, but the bulk of the over budgeting has probably been the employer, because our employee rates have been within market. So we're higher than what the county has in some of our categories, like our family plan. Our employees pay a higher rate than what the county does. But overall, we did a market analysis, and it's pretty in line with market, and that's why I lean towards saying that the bulk of the funds in there would be more employer
Yeah, that's what I
contributions.
thought. I just, see, my concern is that there's employees that don't take health benefits, and they basically get nothing. And if we are paying this with money that we as the employer put in, then it seems that they should have some type of, I mean, we've had this discussion forever.
how did
You
we
know, do
handle
you-
it the last time?
Well, we didn't give them anything, and I don't know that we have anything to give, but it's almost like we're putting money into this account, and then we're saying, okay, well, those of you who participate, have a benefit from the account, but those of you who don't participate, you get nothing, when it's money that, we put in and then conceivably could have been shared all
But
along.
that's almost like the argument about teachers not taking advantage of the YMCA childcare. Like, if you don't have a kid and we're not going to give you a check for it. So I don't.
Do we know how many, what
Yeah,
the
I know.
percentage
It's
of our employees that do not
it's-
that do not use our health care benefits? It can't be very high, I would think.
It's I'm going to say we have about 60% that participate.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the answer is, but it's something that I've always had a
Well,
concern about.
one of the things that I do have, I talked to Mr. Fulmer about this last week, and he's working with Mr. Patrick, I can't remember his
Burnett,
last name,
yeah.
Burnett, Mr. Burnett. And one of the things I'd like to do is look and see if there's any wellness incentives that we could offer universally to our employees. So that would be something that we might do in addition to this.
That would be a good thing, then we could
Because-
offer it to everybody.
Right, it would be offered universally to everybody. I'm
Like
sorry.
a gym membership or
Like
something?
we used to get, if you maintained your healthy weight for a year, you got $300. I mean, they were cash bonuses
I'd
for.
lose.
They were cash,
depends on how you
or
think
it
about
was
it.
like if you participated in certain exercise, like you confirmed that you went to a gym, you would get you would get cash payments for doing these wellness activities, because the theory being that if you participate in these wellness activities, your health costs go down. So, and the other thing is that we have teachers that are under a lot of stress, so I would like to focus on maybe some wellness activities that help reduce some of those stresses. But they would have to be carefully thought out, I think. And that would be universal to all of
And
our
I think it's a
employees.
nice little extra benefit in this time of ridiculousness that we're in.
So that's coming next the next
Okay,
FAB meeting.
I just like to recognize that employees that don't take the health benefits are actually saving us money, because we pay, a significant share. What the employee pays is very small percentage compared to what we as the employer pay, on these health benefits. So if somebody doesn't take it, it actually saves us money.
My last employer actually paid me for not taking, they gave me a credit of some sort
Let-
for
let
not
me just-
taking it.
I really don't want to get too involved but I just need to say, because you don't want to incentivize people not to take health insurance.
Right.
Right.
And a lot of young people, I can see my daughter, who's hopefully not watching, say, Dad, I can make a few $100s, keep a couple $100 by not taking health insurance. No, you get health insurance.
Right.
Because when you get sick, you'll all of a sudden say, how am I paying for this? So I just bring that up.
Well, that's a point, but I'm more for the ones that maybe their spouse has it, so they're getting it somewhere else, and it's saving us money. And we went through this probably 18 years ago, when we switched from having free health insurance for every single employee to, 2 plans. You could pick one or the other. And it was amazing how many people dropped off the rolls because they were covered somewhere else, and they were just using ours because it was free. So I don't know, it's just something I wish we could do
I
some
appreciate.
recognition
Right.
of people that are not using it, but the fact that we're saving money. So I don't know. I don't think we could pay for it from here, though.
I might have my school systems mixed up, and maybe this is getting too far ahead. But did you guys one year give I don't want to call it Christmas bonus, but like a mid-year bonus? Did we do something? Am I getting?
Well,
There was one at the end of the year, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, a flat dollar amount for all employees.
Stipend,
But
we called
that's,
it.
Yeah.
but we can't use these health benefits funds for something like that.
No, that would have to
Because
run
this
through our,
has to be
For
related
health.
to
Yeah.
health. So that's
Health,
why.
which
But
I was
to
gonna,
bonus, we could.
Which, yes. So I kind of like the idea of doing the holiday, just because I think it really does give.
I think it
our
would help
employee-
people out.
It would
Yeah.
really help people out. So, I don't know.
It's not taxable, right? Some of these things that we're talking about could be potentially taxable if we did that.
Well, we can't get into,
yeah, it's going to depend on what it is.
I mean, you told me I give somebody a $50 gift card, I was going to have to tax them.
That is true. Unless you're paying for it personally, you're allowed to come out of your pocket as much as you want.
Potentially,
That's good.
So do we have a recommendation?
well, we have what, almost 5.6 million?
Well, we still have the 14.7 that's not been transferred.
that's true.
So technically, we have almost 20 million.
So we want to make the transfer, right? We want to take care of OPEB because we don't want that hanging over our heads. We have
Well-
to.
And I agree.
So far behind in OPEB. It's
So
just ridiculous.
I think we take care of it. I mean, and then this rears its ugly head every time we go into budget season and stuff. And if we have the money to do it, my
So-
recommendation would be to transfer it.
Okay.
to 1214.
Well, can we put that on hold until we finish this year's?
Yeah, so that was going to be my point.
My
Typically, the
suggestion.
county waits till the year-end results to look at whether they want to do an OPEB transfer, so they look at whatever savings they have from that year, which is why we went back and said, hey, for 5 years, these are the accumulated savings that we just haven't transferred on an annual basis like the county did. So we were
do
playing
separately,
catch-up.
right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. That's what
We
I-
have the exact same health insurance plans. We bid out the health insurance jointly. So our plans match identically, but we have separate funding.
So we've already authorized that, but we just will wait until we
Yeah.
need to make the transfer. I guess the question is, do we want to do the holiday? And if we do, how much?
How much would it save the employees if we did the 75 or the 50?
So that's going to
Just
vary.
Approximately,
So
like a single teacher that has
Right.
the high plan.
It's gonna vary because the
Yeah.
family plan is like
Right.
300 something, and I think
So if we're looking at our premium plan, and let's take the entire family, it's $472 a month. So they're going to save $354 a month
Oh, wow.
times
Oh.
8 is $2,800.
Wow, that's huge.
That's,
But that's the richest plan with the full employee.
Mhm.
with full family attached to the plan.
And I'm sorry, that was 50% or 75?
That's at the 75% rate, was just an example.
Well, the 75 gets this, they got their skin in the game, right?
I
Yeah.
just think that everybody should be paying something, and
Yeah.
I'm giving them, that's a pretty substantial holiday. That's a
Yeah,
pretty,
no, I
Isn't that
agree.
what we did with the Y? Didn't you do 75? Didn't we do 75 with the Y?
That's correct.
We do have the white program.
Right.
Good.
so 75%?
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay.
And just to point out, this will be 75% across the board. So we have some part-time employees that have different rates.
Right.
That's listed on the form, but it'll be the
Whatever
same
rate
thing.
they're paying.
Correct. Yeah.
And that starts in November.
Right.
Yeah, so as long as the board adopts it at their first meeting in October, that's like the bare minimum. If we go any time past that, then we have to look at waiting until December. But I believe there's a October 12th or 13th meeting, whatever that Tuesday is, I think.
We've got a meeting the 22nd, we could put it on there for the 22nd, and,
We put on the
Good for
22nd, we'll
action.
make the time on it, they.
yeah, then
Good.
we'll have plenty of time.
Yep.
So we have
A motion for 75% holidays starting November 1st. Do we have a second?
Second.
Recommend, okay.
And that's through June
Through June.
Yes, ma'am.
2021.
Through the June 1st
Right.
payroll.
All in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
happily.
This is unanimous. Okay.
Thank you, Irene.
Down for action.
Brought that one up.
Okay, next item, FY
Oh,
22
budget priorities.
credit
My favorite.
So this, I think in general, we pretty much,
There's a spider.
oh. A
Hello,
little
little doggy.
spy spider.
Oh, here. This is the one in, it's funny, it's in red. Did you pick that color?
All right.
We don't want to have red, we don't need a red for a budget, do we?
So, one of the things that was mentioned about the budget priorities was last year, or I can't even remember, this has been such a wild ride, but you talked about, we have teachers that are getting a stipend because they have more than 100 students or more than 150 students. So one of the board members suggested one of our priorities would be to eliminate that as a, so if
That was
it's
the
hiring
law.
more teachers or.
We only do that because the law required us to do it,
Yes,
doesn't
but
it?
no other school district does this, because they don't have teachers that teach more than
You mean,
100.
well, we should try.
We should, so
to
one of our
reduce the
priorities is to
workload.
try to eliminate that as a problem, I guess.
There's lowering class sizes at the middle school and high school.
Yeah.
Can't get any lower than they are now.
Yeah. So do we have anything, so open for discussion? So, hearing no discussion, do we? Do we want to just bring this up next meeting? Or wait until
Well,
the
we can
work
hear what the
session?
PTO people have to say
Right.
tomorrow. I think
Yeah.
I think that will be helpful because they're representative of the community.
Okay, let's just put this aside for them now, and we'll bring this up at the next meeting or the work session, because I'm sure we'll be doing a work session on that. All right, next item is the establishing of appropriate funding for the 3R projects. One of the things that Mr. Fulmer brought up at our last meeting is that we get a flat rate of 1.445 million. And we discussed that it might be more beneficial to have a flat percentage, so then that number is dynamic, and it's always changing and adjusting for growth within the community, instead of a flat rate, which is a pretty static number, given how our 3R projects are always behind. So, I don't know if, Mr. Fulmer, if you have any information on that?
No, I put it on there as a discussion. I explained at the last school board meeting that We get the 1.445 on an annual basis from the Board of Supervisors. We also get the bond funded of about 5 million on average over the years. So it could vary up and down a little bit, but about 5 in bond funded. But if you recall from I just closed it, from our 3R list, we have a lot of unfunded 3R items, accumulating probably $40 million over the plan, over the 10 years. So currently, we have a lot of unmet needs, and those are just trying to hit our maintenance, or significant maintenance items, and paving and other just repairs and refurbishments.
Do other counties around us use a percentage, or do they use?
Yes, I haven't had a lot of time. We were working on CIP and stuff, so I haven't been able to dig and do that research yet. Starting the conversation with the county as far as how they do it, but working on getting the additional information from the other localities.
So is that a decision that we can make? I mean, I thought that was dependent upon the Board of Supervisors telling us what we can and cannot have.
Well, I think we could ask. I think it wouldn't hurt us to say, we have this list of 3R projects. It's ever growing longer, and we have all these, $40 million worth of 3R projects. So if we went to a percentage, that amount would always increase every year, and then that in addition to the bond funding. I think it's not an unreasonable request to make to the Board of Supervisors, and I think that there's enough justification in the 3R project to maybe consider it.
So is that what you're suggesting? Is that
Yeah,
goes to
so
percentage?
the county's policy says that they want to contribute 3% each year to their 3R projects. And we're nowhere near that right now. 3% of our operating budget is over $9 million. And right now, we're in the $6.5 million range, but that 300 million or that 9 million is going to be growing steadily. But, you know, if we had, let's say the 3%, if we were doing 3% a year, that 9 million, we would be making up ground and starting to dig away at that $40 million deficit over the 10 years. You know, and unfunded in our first year, we're only at 5.8. So, and a lot of that is carried over from the previous year. So if we had 3% of our entire budget set aside for 3R projects, and the county may say, oh, well, you guys are able to contribute to that 3% as well out of the county transfer that they already provide us. But our budget is already stretched pretty thin. So it's really tough for us to try to meet that gap, to contribute any more to meet that 3% threshold.
So what does the path forward look like to get this done, in your opinion?
So we could make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to, whether it's the cash funded piece, which is the 1.4 now, or to increase the bond funded. When you do the bond funded, all of a sudden that's going to take debt capacity away from our other large capital projects. So if we go from 5 million in bond funded up to 8 million in bond funded, that's 3 million less now that we can't put towards a high school
Right.
6 or Drew Middle School renovation, so.
I see it as more like the cash portion that they give us.
Right.
Okay, so how, I mean, is this a letter from the chairman after this board votes on it?
I would suggest. I think first thing is for us to do a little research, see what other communities are doing, to see if there's some standard practice.
Okay,
I do think we do have at least 2 opportunities, either the 2-on-2 or the 3-on-3, but we also have the joint meeting with all of us, I forget when it is. And for us to provide the board some guidance and a suggestion based on the data we're able. I think this one, for some reason, I feel somewhat optimistic. It's just having a conversation and explaining our needs. Each year, the buildings get older and we expand our facilities. Just think the last couple of years, between, North Star and, we got, even though we have just replaced one Moncure with another, but the buildings are getting older and the mechanical devices are getting older.
sure.
And in light that they are using a 3% for they already have a 3% thinking, maybe just having another conversation with them.
And
Yeah, I
think
agree.
I think we need to focus on the unfunded. if we've got funding for the other categories, unless we anticipate a change in them, then they're covered. But it's the unfunded that we need to focus on. And if we look at that cumulative unfunded over 10 years is 41 million. So if that comes out to approximately, 4.1 million a year, that's closer to 1.5% than 3%. So what we'd have to ask for is an increase of 1.5% to whatever they're setting aside now, so that we can, address our unfunded.
Yeah,
Because I don't think it's realistic to ask for 3%, because if you look at our unfunded, it's nowhere near that.
Well, I'm just saying that they have a number there that they have already presented.
For themselves, but their needs are significantly different from ours for the 3R project. I mean, they have a much smaller base. I mean, we're talking about
Facilities are
30.
very heavily used, I mean.
Right, and, well, we have 31 or 31 schools, plus we've got the transportation and the central, we've got all these other things. So we have a greater base, but I don't want to say I want a number that's, because that's what they're giving themselves. I mean, I want to base it on what our need is, and I think our need is the unfunded, and that would be premised on an assumption that these other categories, the bonds, the 3R set aside in nutrition, are not going to, they're going to remain stable in the projections. So,
I agree. I think it's just something that we have to add to the conversation when we meet with the Board of Supervisors.
right. And then we find out what other people are doing as well.
Yeah.
But if we only need 1.5%, and that'll meet it, then to me, that sounds a lot more feasible than asking for an extra 9 million a year when our needs aren't anywhere near 9 million a year.
right.
I mean, not that we couldn't find a use for it, but we also have to be realistic. How much is a penny on the tax dollar that they told us before? That's
I
2.5
About 1.5.
1.5 million, so,
Yeah.
that's something to think about. So these other unfunded projects grouped and added to the 3R list, are they in the cumulative unfunded, or are they
Yes, ma'am.
not there?
No, they are.
So they're in there already? Okay.
Yeah, so what's changed on this 3R listing from if you just look at the summary from the presentation, what's changed from our board meeting is a couple of the board members, I know Dr. Chase initially pointed out, is why did our unfunded go down as we got to the later years? And that was actually, it didn't go down in that report, it did, but we had pulled out some of those categories like athletic, I know the unfunded athletic items, I know there were other ones listed on here, auditorium upgrades, paving projects. So there were several projects that were pulled out that needed to be done over that 10 years. So we added those back in, and then we added the cumulative column on the far right as requested by the school board.
Yeah.
Okay, now these athletic-related projects, are they primarily for, like safety, like fields that are holes in
It could
them
be
and stuff?
field improvements. The entire, that list is in the actual CIP plan.
That's-
So the only reason I'm asking is I don't want somebody to say, oh, you're going to put more stadiums up or something like that. To the extent that these are necessities versus,
Well, the problem is, we already know that some of our stadiums need to be, our tracks need to be replaced. I think there is a complete list of the projects by category in the CIP that Lionel provided. So anyway, this is something I think that we'll get more information on, and definitely consider discussing more in the future.
and I'm more looking at it in terms of how do we make our case? How can we
Right.
present this, that these are not luxuries, these are necessities for, the welfare of the students. I mean, that's how we sold a lot of our, projects before. I mean, we weren't meeting the ADA requirements in some of our bleachers, or they were unsafe, or,
Right.
that's how we really prioritized, was it a safety issue?
Okay. Moving on, let's get an update on the technology projects that we have authorized. I just wanted to know if we had that information.
Yeah, so it should have been one of the handouts that we gave you at the beginning, and then it should be attached. And so it's just real brief update on a
Okay.
couple of those projects that Jay provided.
Okay.
And I kind of piggyback on the
Here it is.
overall report that I gave at the last school board meeting. And that was my fault. I left off some of those smaller projects. I was trying to touch on the bigger construction projects. I know that a few had asked for some of the smaller
Well, I was
technology
just
projects.
curious as if these projects assisted us in any way, considering that we've gone to a more virtual format.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
absolutely.
make sure
Yep.
that there wasn't anything else that we needed to do, and that these things were under motion, and we're actually,
Yep.
helping alleviate some of our pressures for the internet and the web-based learning. All right. The next meeting is, does anybody have any questions on these projects?
I just have a question. I seem to have seen a few emails from people saying, we don't have we have the Kajeets, but they don't work, and we're not interested in going to the internet cafes. What are those people doing? Or what are we doing for them?
It is true, there are some Kajeets that, depends on where people live, it's going to be very difficult. You may have it work and then not work.
Right.
So we opened up today all our schools for internet cafes. We just have, when you get those, let me know if someone, we need to work with your families, we're providing transportation to get your children in school. That's like, to me, it's non-negotiable. Your kid's gotta be where the technology is, and we've created, again, it's above my understanding, but even these super Kajeets that we have purchased. But there are certain areas, even with the Kajeets, that it could work for like 2-3 hours, and then when the whole community all of a sudden is on, it freezes, it doesn't work. So we made it very convenient now for families. You can go to any school for the internet cafe starting this week. So if you were concerned about only going to, if it's an elementary child, if you were only concerned about having to travel to those 3 schools, now it's available at every location.
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, the next meeting is October 5th. We are adjourned.
Great job.
Close.
Dr. Scott Kisner, Superintendent.